Al-Zahrawi pioneered the use of inhaled anesthesia, sponges soaked in narcotics. 868 years later, Raymond Lully created compounded ether in the 13th century. But it wasn't until 1842 that Crawford Williamson Long had a surgical patient inhale ether from a towel before an operation. The patient reported feeling no pain. Al-Haytham studied the motion of the planets. First to explain why we see the moon as larger when it's near the horizon. 265 years later, Roger Bacon building on Alhazen's work, Bacon was the first Westerner to explain the moon illusion through the enlarged apparent distance of the horizon by the presence of intervening objects. Ibn Sina believed light was composed of particles. 897 years later, Isaac Newton published his particle theory of light in 1704. The theory dominated for 100 years until failed to explain diffraction, interference and polarization of light. Einstein explaining that light was simultaneously a wave and a particle. Al-Biruni developed mathematic techniques for solving cubic equations and extracting numerical roots. 192 years later, Fibonacci provided a positive solution to the cubic equation in 1202, which was 3 trillionths off the correct value. Al-Kiyami measured the solar year to 6 decimal places of our modern value. Created the Jalali calendar with an error rate of less than 1 second per year. 493 years later, Pope Gregory XIII introduced the Gregorian calendar in 1582. It contains an approximately error of 27 seconds per year. Ibn Yahya realized the Milky Way was made up of numerous individual stars. 493 years later, Galileo discovered that the Milky Way was made up of individual stars in 1610. Al-Zuhair developed surgical procedures for cataracts. 621 years later, Jacques Daviel successfully extracted cataracts in 1747. Al-Maghribi developed the concept of proof by mathematical induction and contributed to the binomial theorem. 510 years later, Blaise Pascal gave the first explicit description of mathematical induction in trait du triangle arithmétique in 1665. Al-Tusi, one of the first to advocate a sun-centered heliocentric model rather than a Earth-centered geocentric model. 305 years later, Nicolaus Copernicus published his radical heliocentric model of the universe in 1543, describing the sun as a motionless body that Earth and other planets orbit. Al-Nafis first to correctly describe pulmonary transit. 309 years later, Rialdo Colombo described pulmonary transit in 1559. This laid the foundations for William Harvey's discovery of circulation in 1616. Ibn al-Shatir corrected significant errors in the planetary models of the time, bringing them much closer to modern understanding. Even after 204 years later, al-Shatir's planetary theories are identical to many of Copernicus's. This was only discovered in the 1950s. It had previously been thought that Copernicus invented those theories. Masud al-Kashi calculated pi to 9 sexagesimal places and translated this into 16 decimal places. The first to achieve such accuracy. 217 years later, the German Ludwig van Seulen calculated pi to 35 decimal places. Al-Khalasadi developed algebraic symbolism by using short Arabic words or letters as mathematical symbols. 40 years later, the plus and minus mathematical symbols first appeared in print in Johannes Widman's text in 1489. Michael Stiffel's Arithmetica Integra in 1544 used symbols for mathematical notation.